Very, very excited today to talk with all of you with my two guests around optimizing efficiency and how clear data insights transform fleet management. And today, as we kind of get kicked off and started, I've got two people that I want to go ahead and introduce here. So I've got with me Chris McMahon and Rob Orndorff from Idelic. And I'd love to actually, Chris, have you go ahead and give a quick introduction of yourself, your fleet. Tell us a little bit about kind of what makes you interesting out there as a carrier.
Chris McMahon. I'm the Director of Safety, Recruiting, and Retention for Dunavant, Sea Lane Express, Dunavant Transgulf Transportation, and Dunavant Distribution Group. I've been in the trucking industry. It'll be 29 years on December 13th. Most of that was spent in operations. I moved into the safety role in October of 2020. We run about 320 trucks, all intermodal, mostly regional. It's a different breed. It's a different, transportation is one thing, but intermodal is a whole new world, especially when you came from a background in full truckload like I did. So it's a different challenge every day, I would say.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. Also joining us is Rob Orndorff. Rob, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, I'm Rob Orndorff. I'm Senior Product Manager with Idelic. I'm the guy that Chris will basically say, hey, I've got problems. Help me find a solution. So when Chris is saying he's got things going on, I'm too busy, I need help with this, typically that's where a product comes in, and we just look for how do we build something that helps really any of our fleets do things better. So that's why I'm really excited to talk about operations and efficiency and how we actually can help fleets get better at doing what they need to be doing, because time's valuable.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rob. So before we get started, a couple housekeeping items. We do have that Q&A section that's available for you to ask those questions. We'll see kind of where we've got some breaks in our discussion here and where those questions are coming in, but we've got time at the very end to go ahead and make sure that all of those get answered. So queue up those questions of what you have for Chris or what you've got for Rob on the Idelic product side. And then also this recording will be, this session will be recorded and distributed afterwards. So you'll get a copy of all this as well, okay? So sit back, relax, let's have a good discussion with these two professionals. My name, by the way, is Jonathan Bekowski. I'm the Director of Customer Experience here at Idelic, and I'm gonna be your host for today as we talk with these two great gentlemen. I do want to kind of jump in and talk a little bit about Safety Suite in the Idelic platform. So our core product here at Idelic is called Safety Suite. What we do is we bring together all of your data from your drivers. We bring together that data and we form a comprehensive driver watch list with all of that data. So we use machine learning. Once we have a full driver profile, we're able to then rank and look at the risk and the behavior that goes into each one of your drivers. It's normalized for your specific fleet. Once we have that watch list, as we call it, and that watch list is showing those risky behaviors, we provide coaching plans. Coaching plans are used, they're very prescriptive, and it's a very succinct way to drive a driver change in behavior. So after you've identified, after you've coached, and really what we're going to focus on a lot today is around business intelligence and an effective way to really look at the behaviors and the trends that are going on within your fleet. And so that's the big piece that we're going to talk with Chris and Rob about today. We have over 70 integration partners that really help pull together those full driver profiles and then make up that driver watch list that we have. If we look at our advanced risk prediction, a couple points to call out there. I mentioned that we've got 70 integration partners. Our machine learning is based on over 40 billion mile events. And we've got over 230,000 accidents where we know the events that have happened, how that led up to an accident. We use that and work with fleets to then look at patterns that they have in their data, just like Dunavant, and then we're able to then go ahead and produce that watch list and that risk score. When I talk about coaching behaviors, our coaching plans are very prescriptive. They're over a series of weeks rather than in a single training or a single coaching. We look at training and talk about a carrot rather than the stick approach. And we look at really providing best practices for those coaching plans. The last piece, and then I'll jump into this, is when we look at what Idelic does for aligning for your team to centralize your data. We want to ensure that you can prioritize your efforts on how to coach and drive behavior, that we're showing analytics around that. We make sure that you're able to aggregate your data and then start saving time. There's not a need to bring on an additional business analyst, which I know Chris is going to touch on today, right? We can do that within the Safety Suite platform to ensure that you're much more efficient, that you can know what behaviors you should go after, or what trends are coming in from accidents or telematics. And then ultimately looking at the high risk that is coming through a specific location or terminal that you really want to focus on. So with that, that's a quick overview of what we do here at Idelic. But really, I want to go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And let's go ahead and stop sharing. Give me 1 second. We'll turn this off. If I can find out how to stop sharing. Give me one moment here. There we go. We're pausing sharing. All right. So we're back here. So I want to kind of kick this off. And Chris, I'm going to kind of ask you about historically, how have you used data to make decisions at a safety leadership level? Tell me about what's gone on in the past with data.
Well, prior to implementing Idelic, we did a lot of manual reporting, extracting data from 15 different systems and creating spreadsheets, and then creating a weekly report that would go out to each terminal and the senior leadership. It would take about 4 hours to create that document. And so we started looking at ways to streamline and using telematics and AI and technology to speed up the process and allow us to see everything at a glance.
Okay. 4 hours, that's a lot. That's a lot of time to be spending. Was that a dedicated resource that you had for those 4 hours?
It was someone that was in charge of multiple things that we pulled for 4 hours on one day.
Okay. Okay. So pulling all that data together was taking a good amount of time. When you're looking at that data, what was the most important data that you were looking at? If you could pinpoint maybe what was kind of that North Star metric that you were going after as you were starting to pull together all that data, regardless of how much time it took?
We were looking at which locations had most problems related to any specific item that a safety department would be managing: hours of service, vehicle maintenance, accidents and incidents, all of that, and trying to determine where we need to put the most focus or be more laser focused, I would say.
So
doing that, it was a lot of manual work, and so you're only as good as the data you're getting, and the data is only as good as where you're pulling it from. So
absolutely. When talking with your senior leadership team, I think in previous discussions we had you had told me that they were really focused on CSA scores and basic scores. Can you unpack that a little bit as far as why that was such a large focus?
Well, from a perspective of business relationships and partnerships with customers, that's one thing that's being critiqued heavily by, larger customers, different big box stores and that type of thing, because if you have higher scores, you're higher risk for them due to litigation and different situations with accidents, or so they look at your scores to determine whether you're a risk for them or not. And so that's one of the reasons that, from a high level, seeing the CSA scores is where the senior leadership would be most focused.
That's a direct impact on actually getting business. If all things are equal, right? As far as when it comes down to price, timing, everything else. Right?
True, and it also gives you the ability to see an overall picture of where you are in each one of those basics. So hours of service, vehicle maintenance, unsafe driving, accidents and incident, crash indicator. So they're seeing a high picture of where we are as an organization as well.
Gotcha. You get your CSA scores there. You mentioned telematics. Obviously, you've got accident history. You've got tons of information that's starting to kind of bubble up that you've got to spend those 4 hours every single week to pull together to then present back to that leadership. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So Rob, to kind of switch gears a little bit, as a product manager, you have a lot of conversations with customers. They're going to be your best friend as far as getting that information back inside of a product. I know you've talked with Chris, and Dunavant as a whole. What were some of the big needs around reporting that you've heard, some of the consistent conversations as far as what fleets were telling you were like big takeaways? Can you talk to some of those major points that you heard after dozens and dozens of conversations with fleets like Dunavant?
Yeah, I'm gonna turn that slightly. One of the very first questions I ask any customer, just how are you doing day to day? And frankly, the most common answer is I'm too busy to do my job, or I'm too busy to focus on this or this, or I need help, I need efficiency, help me get this. Like basically help me solve my problems. So very often it's too much data to actually analyze. So that's kind of where we step in. And as Chris said, they had 15 different integrations they were pulling data from. So it's an awful lot to sift through. So really what we're trying to help fleets with is using the BI and analytics and just general optimization to say, here's the problem areas you need to spend your time on. So we've always been focused more on the driver standpoint, making sure they're readily able to identify which drivers to spend the time on. But what we've been evolving into with the BI and analytics focus is what terminals do I need to focus in on? What problems can I readily identify? What should I do about it? So really, there's often that trouble of saying, I don't know where to focus. I've got 2 hours left in my day. I need to get X, Y, and Z done. How do I approach it best? How do I get the reports I need to prove what I'm trying to present to my executive team? How do I basically back things up with data? Because I've got a gut feel. I just don't know if I can prove it to somebody. So very often when you're going to the executives at the fleet, if you don't have the data to back up your gut feeling, it gets shot down. So very often it's help me find this, help me find the data that helps support where my theories are going, or tell me where I'm wrong. So really the focus on BI and analytics has always been help me prove my story, help me focus on what matters the most. So that's honestly the most common thread for almost every fleet we talk with. I've got problems. I don't have enough time in my day to do it myself. Help me generate efficiency and do it better.
Absolutely. So rolling up that data is one of the things that I heard too, right? Looking at the locations, looking at terminals where you've got the issues. Chris, do you see that same thing? And I had a fleet tell me that, maybe I don't have a driver problem, I've got a manager problem. Maybe it's what's going on at that specific terminal that I need to address, and a cultural piece there. Do you find that analytics can help you make that decision around, a terminal manager and operational manager where you need to be focused on?
Yes. I mean, I say this all the time. Driver management or dispatch is not just about dispatching a driver. It's also managing his hours of service, managing his maintenance, managing his pay, making sure he gets home safely every day. And, that has to be the focus for everyone in a company. And basically boxing everyone in, you always have to look at the bigger picture from every perspective, instead of your silos, which, I've been taught over the years that lots of times we end up in silos. So we're only concerned about our situation and not the whole organization, or looking at it from the bigger picture. So with the products you guys offer, we're able to do that. We're able to see each organization, each terminal, and then be laser focused on the terminals where we're seeing the most problems, which has helped us a great deal over the past 3 years.
I'd love to kind of unpack that a little bit more. So can you kind of tell us a little bit about why you decided to bring on a BI tool, how you landed on SafeView, and then maybe talk with us about how you're how that's supporting your efforts with your team.
Well, we were looking at a way to do this ourselves. So we saw platforms besides Idelic and SafeView. SafeView was the first platform I saw. And so we looked at doing it ourselves, and constraints with IT departments, it's hard for you to have someone build that out yourself. So basically I took the facts, like Rob said, I took the facts to the senior leadership and said, I can make this happen without hiring someone to actually do it with this product. And so we did it. It helps the team manage their day better. It helps me focus on, what do I need to look at today? Because that's the first thing I look at every morning is Idelic and where we're at in each terminal, where we're events that happened the day before, all of those different things. And it gives the terminal the ability to also do
that. So not just within the safety team, right? Having that same data, right? The same master data that's available to everyone else within that organization, right? So you're also, I'm guessing, not having to distribute reports, right, on a certain Monday.
No, and we stopped doing the reporting as soon as we went live.
Okay. Okay. How is that type of data being received at a terminal level?
Well, we're also doing some other things with it as regarding onboarding. And so it's engaged, they're engaged. We had a meeting in February of this year, a safety meeting, and we went over everything, where we were in each location, and it sparked questions and debate over certain things. And I think the product and being able to pull the data from the product and create the agenda for that meeting was very successful for us.
Gotcha. Okay. Kind of coming back, Rob, to you. I want to talk about this amount of data that's coming in and ask you right around efficiencies, right? So what are you hearing with fleets when you've got so much data out there? You've got basic scores, you've got accidents, telematics, cameras, hours of service events, right? A plethora of data. Can you talk to me a little bit on what you heard from fleets, just like Chris here in Dunavant, around efficiencies?
Yeah, one of the big things there is the repeatability of being able to do this. Chris, you had somebody that was pretty much doing this 4 hours a day, once a week. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of money going into basically just pulling reports and getting some kind of standard. If that guy's out on vacation, like let's say he's sick for a month or something along those lines, who's going to pick it up and who's going to actually be able to produce those things? It's not readily transitionable to somebody else. So a lot of the efficiency gains from our side is we're able to create that repetitive process where it's create it once and it just works going forward. So being able to look at your yearly reports and just how to automatically know how you are doing week to week is pretty readily possible. And it's not something you have to create every time. So I created this report. This is exactly what I want everybody to use as their North Star. This is the things we're going to keep track of and communicate that to the terminals. From then on, it's just keep an eye on this report and just manage towards it. So you're not having to go recreate anything, and it's just functioning by doing your jobs. So you're not managing that actual visual or the report data. You're not having to pull it. It's just going and looking and see spot check. How am I doing? And just knowing exactly how your efforts are going forward. So the efficiency gains are all over the place just from the time savings. Like Chris no longer needs somebody to pull a report 4 hours a week. That saves time. They can reallocate resources, and it just really kind of fine tunes where there's time wasted. Because quite frankly, I bet everybody on this call says, I wish I had that extra 4 hours in my week. So just gaining a little back on just creating reports really does add up.
It seems like too, Chris, you got those 4 hours back, right? What you're able to then do is the person that's creating reports, tell me about what they're doing now. Are they picking up the phone? Are they actually, talking with drivers? Are they now maybe using that time to coach? Tell me about where, like, that person doesn't just go away. They start doing other functions, right? What are some of those functions that you've seen kind of enabled through having efficiencies?
So we're doing, we created PDP plans that have to do with our 90-day onboarding. So someone from each location or each department of the company speaks to a driver for the first 13 weeks every week. And then we detail what went on in that conversation inside your platform. So we're able to look at telematics and say, we've looked at your telematics and we see this going on. What can we do to help you? Or that could be someone from safety. We also would have someone from the terminal or someone from accounting talk to them one week about your settlement sheet and how does that look, and do you need help understanding it and the way it's laid out? Are there any questions about your pay? Those types of things. So, and it allows that. Rob was talking about relationships. That's my key focus. I think building relationships with people, no matter whether it be a driver or a customer, that's how you keep them. And so having multiple people in the organization talk to that driver so that there's a building of a relationship with not just the terminal staff, but also external people that they don't necessarily talk to on a daily basis. It allows them to vent when there's a problem or get answers from someone else that they feel they might trust more. I mean, not that that's a bad thing, but everyone's different and not everyone is able to build relationships in the same way. And it's not a teachable thing. You can't teach someone how you build a relationship with someone.
Absolutely. I'm hearing that not only have you been able to free up time, but now you're able to focus and look at metrics around something like onboarding. So now using that data to not look at who we have to address from risk or where we're trending, but let's take a look at our onboarding process and what we're seeing through there. Then being able to use coaching and professional development plans to then say, okay, we're going to standardize our first 90 to 120 days to make sure that we're addressing any issues that we've seen previously through onboarding. So you're now able to kind of change and adjust your onboarding program to make sure that that driver's sticking with you, to make sure that they feel kind of needed within Dunavant. Is that right?
Correct. And it also allows us to bring issues to the forefront because of what we're seeing from the data with that driver in the beginning of his onboarding, so that wherever there's an issue, we can mitigate that quickly.
Do you see a different risk profile of drivers during that first 90 to 100 days versus someone that's been with you for 5 to 6, 7 years?
Honestly, insurance looks at drivers who've been with a company been driving less than 2 years as a risk, and anyone that's been driving for over 5 years a risk, because the new ones are new and don't know everything, and sometimes can be cocky, and the older ones who have more experience tend to be, I've been doing this for 30 years, I'm good,
Yeah.
So yes, and also looking at it from a perspective of, companies have changed their hiring requirements or their ability to bring on a driver. Since we're owner operators, we are 90% owner operator based. We don't hire, we contract with them. You're able to also, because of the way the economy went and COVID and all that, it took a dive in trying to find drivers because everything was so busy and we didn't have anybody coming out because everyone was scared of COVID. And so hiring a driver or getting a driver was hard. And so all companies lowered their requirements of experience. In looking at that, we did not, one of the key takeaways from that, from an insurance perspective, is you're going to have a higher risk with these people. They're going to create more risk. But in actuality, that did not happen. And I was able to prove that from the data we pulled from SafeView and Idyllic.
So when you pulled that, was it something that you went right to your, say, COO or your president? And were you Tell me about that conversation and how that worked.
Well, when you're talking about things, you always bring the facts.
Yeah.
And I'm all about the facts. So I've created an environment where I have the data. In fact, that's part of the reason we have your platform is I'm all about the facts. And when you bring the facts, there's no arguing the facts. So from that perspective, you've got to prove it. You can't just throw something at the wall and hope it sticks. And then, because then especially if you're dealing with me, because I'm going to come back and say, here's the facts. They don't say that, they don't prove that. So, and having that ability is awesome.
I love it. Bring the facts. Bring the facts. All right. So let's maybe take a look at some facts. So Rob, I'd love if you could maybe share a little bit of what SafeView looks like. And even Chris, as Rob is going through this, I'd love to hear kind of some commentary from you about it. I know we're going to be inside of a test environment, but still we're going to have some of the very, very similar screens. Just Rob, what you're seeing here, and then Chris, how you're potentially using some of the different widgets or dashboards within the BI analytic tool of SafeView.
All righty. So actually, I'm going to start off on the watch list. Just because this is one of our key areas where it's looking at the drivers and understanding that risk profile. So as Chris is saying, like bringing the details and just saying, here's the evidence that I know this is going on. We're able to readily rank, order those different drivers to say, who should I really focus my priority on? So I'm just going to pick on Jonathan because he's here to not really defend himself. But whenever we go through this,
that's a good looking driver right there. That's a good looking driver.
I don't know about that. He clearly has speeding problems and some accidents. So we get all this data in and we are able to see over time, how is that driver doing? So you can actually have a coaching conversation. Say, yeah, we see you've got a speeding problem. Let's do something about it. And then see how it's going over time. But that's been where Idelic has been focused in the past mostly, where it's managing still the day-to-day, the driver, and keeping things progressing and ultimately reducing risk. But really the focus with the BI and analytics within SafeView is to help us get a better understanding of how the fleet as a whole and how those locations and terminals are doing. So I'm just going to click over into the first one with reporting. Minimize this to get some of the stuff out of my way. But whenever you come in here, right here, we basically are just pulling some quick reports together that keep it focused right on screen to say, if I'm looking at how my events are going, let's look at accidents. Let's look at the severity of those accidents over the past 12 months. What day of the week are they coming in? What's my big accident types? And really, how are my trends doing? Because like, as I'm looking through this, I might find something immediately. Like this chart right here, again, this is a testing environment with some odd data, but as I'm looking at the accident count by type, if I'm looking at this, I say, okay, I've got a big old problem. I have 2 accident types around tire damage and equipment damage that vastly outweigh any other accident. So what am I doing about it? So
Rob,
right
could you pause there for a second?
Absolutely.
Because it's when you mention basic scores and you're looking at vehicle maintenance, it seems like you'd be able to find a trend here, right, around something like tire damage, equipment damage, where maybe that needs to be a key focus, then help drive up the vehicle maintenance basic score. Am I making the right correlation there?
Yes.
Okay.
And you will discover that it's always going to be in the intermodal industry. It's always going to be tires, lights, and brakes.
Yep. Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate the cutoff because like that's exactly what I'm going for here. Because like if I see these are my 2 top accident types, I know exactly where I need to focus. I can reach out to our maintenance department and say, guys, what's going on? This is vastly outweighing anything else. Like it's not as costly to us, but the frequency is killing us. So we're getting nickel and dimed all over the place. Our CSAs are taking a hit. What can we do to improve? And really starting that action plan to say, we're going to target these 2 accident types and just do something about it. As we go through some of these other widgets, like you can see how things are going over time. So this one's just looking at your accident preventability over time and just really understanding how my trends are going. Like, is a lot of the accident coming in, is it a driver's potential fault, or could we have done something? Is there a way to coach around it? And really identifying Are we getting just a ton of animal strikes, something like that, where that's not the driver's fault for it in a lot of cases. So really understanding the trends and the breakup of the data helped me get those quick insights. So as we dig through, we have some telematics and camera event widgets as well that kind of really focus in. And again, I'm just going to hit on this one in particular. As I'm looking at the camera events, I can look across the fleet and say, what major problems can I identify from this? And first one being driver drowsiness. Do I have a lot of drivers that are getting swung in their schedules and working nights and weekends when the week prior they were working days? What can I do about that? And really targeting on what kind of things is going on across the fleet rather than just with this individual driver. So there's a lot of capabilities within this, and we have some different canned dashboards here that kind of really take a deeper dive into some of this, where it's, okay, let's look at those accident type trends over the last 365. Any standout? Yep, I've got two that I really need to focus in on, but if I want to look beyond just those two, I can turn them off and say, okay, everything else is relatively stable and I can see what's going on. But also if you're going into an executive presentation and you're asked that simple question, how are we doing? Or is the accident rate trending down? I can just snag a visual really quick and just go. So I can talk to this visual and just say, yeah, my Chicago terminal is struggling with these factors. They have the highest number of accidents, and really kind of target what am I going to do with this data?
So
So
let's,
a lot
Rob,
of
if I
it.
could pause
Yep.
there. I mean, this is great for understanding, let's say, gut versus data. So,
Yes.
Chris, is we talk about someone's gut feel, right, versus what the data is saying. Do you see examples in here? It's like, well, my gut told me this, but you know what? The data is telling me something else. Do you have any examples you can share there around kind of how data is maybe proving the gut wrong?
I have to think about that a second.
Putting you on the spot. Is
I think that's
maybe
best
it's like a
Chris.
I don't
terminal.
know. Well, I would have to think about that for a minute.
Like,
Well, I mean, a prime example would be the drivers, our drivers who are hiring now that have less experience, are our biggest risk. And then we proved that that wasn't true.
okay, okay. And I saw Rob, you went right to this widget here. Is about, we were just talking about tenure. And we were talking about how we need to watch out, at least insurance companies are focused on that first 2 years and then 5+ years afterwards. And this is what our data is starting to show here, right? Is that maybe that's what our gut says, is that we've got risk here. But what is the data actually saying about after 5, 10, 15 years?
Yeah, this one's kind of a wake up call to some fleets. Like a lot of fleets will pin it on the new drivers because that's the easiest and most readily recognizable possibility that our accidents are getting caused by our new drivers. But once you really get into some of the data, people are finding that, oh, it's actually my 2 to 4 years, my 5 year drivers that have just become complacent. So being able to see this kind of data says it's not necessarily a new hire problem. Yep, they're having different types of accidents, like they're backing into poles at a terminal, but they're not causing the major accidents. They're not running off the road, doing rollovers, things like that. That's happening in this bucket. So it kind of lets me target those different audiences a little bit uh, more in a refined manner.
Can I add to that? We have, so we're transitioning to a new ELD product, and one of the questions that I asked the drivers yesterday was, we're talking about vehicle maintenance, and I asked the question, where do you think most of our vehicle maintenance issues are? Is it vehicle 1 or vehicle 2? And the drivers always say vehicle 2, and that is an inaccurate statement. No matter where you're at, it's always going to be vehicle 1. With us, especially because we don't own the chassis and containers that we pull, so we have no control over them. But no matter what company you work with, the higher issues are generally with vehicle 1.
Interesting. Are there any other insights that you found with using SafeView, Chris, that you wanted to share with us as far as what you're able to pull and share back with the organization?
We've really talked about focusing on the number of when accidents occur. That what the days of the week. It's kind of an interesting scenario how to determine why that is the case. It's a little harder to figure out honestly, but seeing it, it brings into focus something that most people wouldn't even think about. You know, is it a trend on a specific day of the week?
Even hour on duty, I'm sure would be something similar as far as finding those trends with hour on duty for a specific driver.
Correct. And that would be more what we would look at versus looking at it from a perspective of, okay, you're having more accidents on a Tuesday and a Friday. And if I was looking at that perspective, I wouldn't understand the Tuesday as much because on Friday, everyone's probably in a hurry to get home.
Right.
Be my theory on that. But we all want to get every driver home safely and the motoring public as well. So
absolutely. Rob, anything else to share since we've got you inside of safety?
One of the key things I want to call out is a lot of the things that are really interesting to find is where you can manage by exception. Like in this bottom chart, it's just looking at the telematics by terminal over the last year. So immediately when I look at this, I say, oh, Pittsburgh's got a humongous problem for this month. So it gives me something to focus in on where it's, okay, did we make an actual change there? Did we change the telematics provider? Did we change some settings? Or what exactly happened here? So if I'm not in that Pittsburgh terminal, I probably don't have a clue. So this gives me the tooling to go and actually reach out to say, hey, Pittsburgh managers, what's going on here? Did we change something that can explain this? And for this one, it might be, yeah, we just changed some settings just because we wanted to see if we change a setting, it's going to cause a major problem to us, or if we're going to catch new things, or did we change people's schedules, or what exactly caused that spike? So it allows you to really have those conversations where before it was, yeah, everything looks fine to me, but I can't really identify a spike readily. Or even looking at this, I can see accident trends over as long as I've been on platform or as long as I have the data for it. If I can readily have those conversations with my fleet operators and really understand how things are going. But going to click over to the summary view. A lot of people like seeing the numbers first and seeing trends that way. But obviously there's a lot of data sets in here. So the different accident types, the telematics, enforcement, it's really anything you'd really want to really focus in on managing. And just looking at this, I can see my terminal structure and say, okay, here's all my different terminals. Maybe I'm looking at who has the most accidents, but that might not necessarily be the real factor I want to look at. It might be how am I doing compared to the last 6 months that I'm looking at. So understanding which fleets are trending, well, which terminals are trending which way based on the data allows me to actually take action and reach out, figure out what's going on and do something about it. So there's a lot of power in actually understanding those trends and being able to take action. And the biggest thing with this is I don't have to go create these things. I can just log into the platform, let my data function as it comes in from all my integrations, and I just manage the data and manage more proactively and more efficiently.
Fantastic. Yeah. Chris, any comments here around not so much looking at those overall company trends, but being able to get down to the location or terminal level?
That's key because you're spending more time at each location trying to cover things instead of being focused on we're going to cover this, but we're going to focus on this specific item because that's where your problem is in that location. And it might be a totally different thing in every other terminal, but you're seeing that trend of speeding 10 to 15 over in one location and everyone else is fine, or following distance, rolling stops, and determining where we're seeing them are, in a rolling stop issue inside of the ports and rails, they have stop signs, but they're not necessarily mandated by the port. It's only a certain circumstance where it might be valid. And so determining that is key. And also with accidents and incidents, you'll see that you're probably going to have more incidents than you are accidents. And our platform accidents or anything on a roadway and incidents or anything in a port rail or on a private property.
Okay. That's how you're classifying.
Yes.
Yeah, gotcha. So being
Well,
able to distinguish based on how that data is coming in, where you've got those specific trends as well.
and true. And, with your platform, you have the ability to not count incidents against the driver, but from an insurance perspective, that's what when I'm looking at this, like I'm an insurance company. So I'm looking at it, whatever event you've had, no matter whether it was a false positive on a rolling stop or it was an incident at a rail where someone hit you instead of you hitting them. It's still, you have to look at it from that perspective, because if you're, in all honesty, an insurance company would say you have a driver that's had 3 accidents or incidents in a year and none of them are his fault. The insurance response would be, well, how do you know they weren't his fault and he just didn't get lucky that it wasn't proven that it was? So you're looking at it from the bigger picture of, and that's been a struggle in our organization, because that's the way I look at it. And terminals are like, well, this shouldn't count against him because of this, it's not his fault. It's not about fault, it's about risk.
And I'm guessing legal counsel looks at that as well, too, right? An opposing legal counsel is going to look at that very similar to way that
exactly. You're looking at it from a perspective of legal issues, or you're also looking at it from a potential insurance cost or reduction in premiums. So you have to look at it externally in the bigger picture and not be solely focused on, well, it wasn't this person's fault, or this is not accurate, because it wasn't their fault, no matter what the event is. So that's been one of my struggles with being able to provide the data that we have, is getting people to understand we're looking at this from an insurance perspective or a legal perspective.
Yep. To avoid those nuclear verdicts, really making sure that we're all on the same page around any of that same data. Absolutely. Right. Chris, is Rob's kind of going through a couple screens. I would, love to kind of ask you around how the utilization of a BI tool in SafeView has it shifted how your safety program is viewed by anyone outside of your direct safety team?
I think senior leadership has seen a huge improvement in 3 years. I know that our insurance agent and carrier have been happy with the results that they've seen over the past 3 years. And numbers and the data show the trends and the changes. So when you're trending positive, it's a great for the organization, great for the insurance, great for the teams, no matter which department they're in.
Absolutely. And Rob, anything else to showcase here before I kind of wrap up with some final questions?
No, what I was kind of showing as Chris was talking was just really quickly how Chris could go and prove exactly from the data, what are our preventables looking like? When are we saying we could have done something about this? It might have been the driver's issue. It might have been something on our side. But readily, I can just go into the accidents, click on preventable as a filter, and look at the time series and just say, okay, yeah, if I'm talking to my insurance company, they might have my raw accident count or my DOT reportables, things like that. But if I'm able to present data like this that says, hey, yeah, we spiked here, but this is when we put a plan in place and this is how it's progressing over time, that's a conversation I can have with my fleet internally and also externally when I'm talking with the insurance companies. I can just say, here's what we're doing about the risk. And I think that's a much more proactive approach that is actually recognized, to say, I see you're doing the right things, just keep it up and we'll work with you on your premiums. So data is really a lot of power if you use it.
Absolutely. All right. So I'm gonna wrap up here with just I have 2 more questions for each of you. So Chris, I want to ask you around any advice for safety teams, leadership teams out there that are looking to lean into a business intelligence solution and to make better analysis and decision making? Do you have any kind of words of wisdom from Chris?
I would say that making the decision to purchase a product has been valuable. You know, nothing is free, and it comes at a cost, but you know, at the end of the day, you have to weigh out, does the cost and the value of it outweigh the cost of it? And honestly, I've not seen where it wouldn't. You know, it today we have everything at our fingertips. So you know, and I know I actually was in a meeting in Nashville a couple of weeks ago, and I actually was talking about idyllic and safety, and it was a very small fleet, and then we started, it opened up a conversation between the two companies about, okay, well, how do you do this and how do you do that? And I think you gain some of that through the different companies you deal with, and being able to get the data from you and see where everyone else is having problems. So then your platform becomes better, and then every organization you're working with also has a return on that investment.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We have one question that came in around build versus buy. Two that I want to ask you. I've got you here. So we touched a little bit on that. You guys made a decision to build. I'm sorry, to buy instead of build internal. And I know that, you know, IT teams can be swamped with projects, especially kind of just in time type of projects. Could you kind of maybe shed a little bit more light or kind of recap that decision as far as what was either, you know, internal priorities that ITA was focused on versus what you needed to move and how fast you needed to move, and kind of why you went with the purchasing rather than building it in-house?
So it's a time constraint. First of all, we wanted to move faster than they could develop. Also, functionality, having them support it. So our IT department not only supports the tree trekking organizations, but it also, and the warehousing, but it also, we have cross-border into Mexico. We have freight forwarding, domestic brokerage, international brokerage, customs clearance. So we operate in every vertical of logistics, not just trucking. And so, you know, dividing that time up between taking someone for 6 to 8 months to develop something pulls them away from other projects with all the entire organization, not just us.
Yep. And IT is usually a shared resource, right? And the projects they have coming on, you mentioned a new ELD provider. We hear all the time about you know, fleet switching from, you know, different camera telematics providers as well, right? There's always something going on, so it's one less thing to put inside of their plate. Is to go ahead and have someone kind of help you kind of move that forward. On that same note, as far as if we're talking technology, Rob, I'd love to hear a little bit more around the idyllic product roadmap around BI. Can you tell us kind of what's on the maybe near and maybe a little bit further horizon out there? Can you give us a sneak peek into that?
Yeah, one of the biggest capabilities that we've been asked for and are currently working on is around the driver customizable scorecards. So being able to actually wait and choose what things I want to score a driver on. So I can readily have some concrete method to say, you are a score of this, and this is what it means. So that also just kind of opens up the door for like being able to do rewards and recognitions, being able to actually have a driver management program and really understand how my drivers are performing beyond just the risk standpoint. So the current iterations are really focused towards that driver scorecard. But as we kind of walk through on the platform a bit, we are going to be doing some other improvements around the existing features. So being able to look at the normalizing factors like mileage and hours to say, what's my accident rate per million miles, and get that data in and rolling. Also, there's going to be some enhancements around how to actually use the visual insights and how do I create those different visuals? How do I look at other data sets and compare them side by side and just say, is my related to my telematics or a particular kind of telematics? Can I kind of really drill into and identify things a little bit better? So a lot of this is kind of an evolution where it's like we listen to the customers and say, what's the biggest thing you're trying to solve for? How can we help? And really, we're building in that direction. So also, I want to just loop back really quick on Chris's question about the build versus buy. I think every fleet we've talked with has tried to do this internally, and they quickly identify, hey, that's a lot more costly than I thought it was going to be, because you've got to build that yourself. You've got to hire the experts. You've got ongoing maintenance. You've got to maintain this thing. So those costs really add up and they don't go away. So even if you could build it in-house, you're kind of limited on the data. You're only looking at your own internal data. So almost innately, those kind of solutions become biased, where you're saying, oh, this is why my accidents are occurring. But that's only based on your data. If you're looking across the industry and fleets like you might have some different insights. So us having the more, I guess, a wider breadth of data coming in, we're able to kind of really target those insights and keep things moving. So another really big factor in that is you guys don't have to fight for resources. A lot of people have BI tools internally, but everybody knows ops is going to get the priority for really maximizing the profits. But I think safety can really benefit from something with SafeView, because you guys aren't a cost center. End of the day, you're protecting the profits of the company, and this is how you're going to do it, through using technology and saying, I can run my own reports, I can identify my own things, and I'm going to just operationalize and make everything as efficient as possible. So it's a great tool to have for us, honestly.
Great points. So I'm going to wrap up with this one thing, and Chris, I want you to have the final word on this. Rob, you mentioned scorecards and being able to award, right, or recognize. That's been traditionally different than a watch list where you're looking at risk. Chris, what are your thoughts on Idelic coming out with a scorecard approach to being able to award and recognize the safety and the safe drivers are out there? What are your thoughts?
I would be on board with it. We're using the risk score today to determine whether a driver is eligible for awards that we already do. But I will say that, that risk score also, in providing that to the driver, also creates competition between drivers, because everyone wants to be the best. And so then they're playing off of each other and going, well, your number's this, and my number's this. So how do we improve that? Or how do I get better than you? Why is my score higher than your score, lower than your score? So it's created competition.
I love just another way to continue to be the best within the fleet, right?
Correct.
Absolutely. All right. Great way to end this up. I'm going to look to see if there's any other questions. I think we've answered some as we've kind of gone along. I'll give anyone kind of a minute to ask any questions. I think we've answered them as we went along, so I think we're good there. So if there's nothing else, I know that there's a quick poll that we put out there as far as if you're interested in learning a little bit more around business analytics, Idelic, and what we do. We put out a little poll there for you to go ahead and submit answers, and we can follow up after that. But with this, we're coming at the top of the hour. So Chris, Rob, thank you both very much. Chris, I know as we talked before, you've had a heck of a week. So we greatly appreciate you taking the time to talk with us and the other fleets that have joined us today. I know I learned an incredible amount looking at the efficiency around data, hearing a little more about the product roadmap, Rob, from you. So gentlemen, thank you very much. Have a great, safe rest of your week.
You too.
Thanks, everybody.